participant. I think we should just go ahead and start on time. It's 3 p.m. Israel time. And let me just introduce myself. For those of you who've been here a little bit earlier, show the behind the scene, but we're officially starting. My name is Zev Lavi. I'm the Vice President of International Business Development at the Federation of Israeli Chamber of Commerce. And I'm very much excited to have this very unique and informative webinar with our partner from TPY Capital and BCG. And I think it's going to be a very exciting and very great webinar. So I'd like, first of all, to start with some thank you notes. And I'd like to start by thanking our partners in BCG, both BCG Israel and their foreign practices in the Gulf, in Dubai, and the various places where all the speakers are in currently. And a big shout out to TPY Capital founder and Guy Amin, who's, I'm going to introduce him in a second, and his team for helping and partnering with us in this event. And of course, our partners in the Israeli Manufacturer Associations who helped us and are joining us forces with helping the Israeli companies finding their ways in the UAE. We're not going to be long with the welcoming remarks. I just want to do a bit of a housekeeping first and give you the rundown of how this is going to happen. So we're going to start with a very quick session, about 30 minutes with the overview and some Q&A. Thank you very much, Augustine. And then follow that, we're going to have 2 breakout rooms, which you have all registered to. So you're going to automatically go to the room that you have registered. There's going to be 2 rooms, one on Fintech and Telecommunication, and the other one is Public Sector and Renewables. They're going to be moderated, and you will be able to ask questions in those rounds as well. In the first round of the general introduction, you will be able to ask questions, and we would like to encourage you to ask questions. So please feel free to type in your questions in the checkbox. It's just right underneath here in the toolbox underneath your screen. Just write whatever you want. We'll gather all the questions and we'll be able to answer them. There's a lot of know-how within the speakers today, and we want to address those questions that you may have. And regarding videos and stuff like that, please remain unmuted, and in the breakout rooms, the moderator itself will tell you what to do. We will not convene after the breakout session. So once the breakout session will finish, the webinar will finish, and we will send the recording of this webinar to everybody in an email right after the seminar. Okay, so this is about housekeeping. A little bit about the Chamber of Commerce. We're the biggest and oldest business organization in Israel. I just want to tell you that we have done a lot with the UAE and Bahrain. We're very much excited. We want to help Israeli companies to find their way safely and successfully within the Gulf. I have just came back from Manama, the capital of Bahrain, where I signed an MOU with the Bahrain Chamber of Commerce, one of the biggest private sector organization there with 60,000 organizations. And before that, we have signed a strategic partnership agreement with the Dubai Chamber of Commerce, which is really an enormous organization. It works a lot with the private sector within Dubai and the Gulf. We have access to those organizations, and we want to help Israeli companies together with them to find local distributors or partners, etc. So please feel free to contact us. With me today is also Adas Tzur from my team, who is dealing with the UAE, and Shai Hillel, who is helping us with this webinar. So thank you very much, and also thank you to Eldad from BCG Israel and to Augustine from BCG, who is helping us with everything. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Guy Amin, who is the founder and co-partner of TPY Capital. Just a little bit about TPY Capital. Is Tel Aviv-based venture capital. His later fund of 100 million was launched in June 2018. TPY invests in B2B enterprise software with a focus on revenue-generating companies. In terms of sectors, TPY is investing in companies that leverage the exceptionally growing power of data and machine intelligence, such as cloud infrastructure, AI, big data analytics, human augmentation, and productivity, such as dev tools and sales and marketing, collaboration tools, and quantum computing. guy who will take it from here is a great guy in general, ex-McKinsey, excuse me, BCG guys, and a Harvard graduate. Guy, take it from here.
Hey, thanks a lot, Zev, and everyone who's attending this, a little bit of a historic webinar. Many of them are taking place, but we're really delighted to have some of the top minds of BCG working in the Gulf for cumulatively dozens of years present to us today. So I'm Guy Men from TPY Capital, Tel Aviv-based VC. I'm delighted to introduce you to Godfrey Sullivan, who leads BCG's financial institutions business in the UAE and is based out of Dubai. Godfrey has more than 20 years of consulting experience with financial institutions and regulators, business strategy, operation, and digital innovations. And he also works as a mentor for fintech startups across the Middle East. He will accompany me for the breakout on the fintech sector as well. So Godfrey, absolutely great to have you share your thoughts with us today. If you can wave your hand, people will recognize you here. Maybe we'll start off at the very top. What should we think about when we, as Israelis, think of the UAE?
So I think one of the first things to think about is that this is a federal country. So it's actually made up of 7 pretty autonomous emirates. And they come together under a broader federal government. So when you think about doing business in the UAE, you also need to think about, which are the most attractive emirates. Now, the 2 biggest ones are Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and they work together. But there's also a tension and rivalry between the 2 of them. I think the other things to remember, it's very similar to Israel. We have about 9 million people. We have a GDP per capita, which is pretty similar to Israel, and the population is very fragmented. So there's around 200 different nationalities. Each nationality group has their own community, their own restaurants and cafes, and it's 90% expat. So I think there's a few kind of unique characteristics about the country which make it pretty distinct from many other places around the world.
Great. And in Israel, there's been considerable talk about the UAE, now Bahrain, agreements and accords and what they mean for Israeli companies. Knowing the UAE the way that you do, what's the level of excitement there about these agreements?
So today is a pretty exciting day with the announcement in Israel and the visit from the UAE delegation. I think there's excitement at a couple of levels. So the government is very enthusiastic about this deal. Just during the course of this morning, there were 3 different major governmental entities which I've heard are doing important things in terms of preparing to work with Israel, ranging from government entities looking to hire Israeli nationals specifically, looking to work with Israeli companies, and planning engagements over in Israel. So there's a lot of excitement at the government level. At the business level, people are also very excited about different opportunities that may emerge. And I think if I was to categorize it into kind of 4 groupings, there's excitement about talent. I think that's a big challenge in the UAE. How do you really get top world-class talent to come over to this part of the world? There's excitement about tech, and Israel is known for all kinds of tech innovation, and many companies are looking to see how they can work together with them. There's excitement about tourists. The UAE is a very developed kind of tourist hub, and I think the opportunity for Israelis to come and spend vacations over here excites much of the tourism industry in a particularly challenging time. And then fourthly, I think there's excitement about travel. So, many of the people, such as myself, it's great to be able to go over and now fly directly, take the family on a holiday and visit a very important and kind of historical part of the world. So, yeah, it's a nice positive mood at the moment.
Got it. So what should an Israeli company know about if there's, you did mention it's a federation, but is there a way of doing business in the UAE? Are there certain do's or don'ts in interacting with the business sector in the UAE?
So I think a couple of points in that regard. I think firstly, just on timing. So now there is a fantastic aura and a really nice kind of honeymoon period where the whole country and many of the people are looking towards Israel and thinking, this is a great beginning of a partnership. What are the opportunities that can emerge? So I think timing for those of you on the call thinking about the market, I would certainly encourage you to do so quickly, because over the next kind of in 6 months, a year and a half time, things will revert to business as usual. So I think there's a nice window of opportunity where we can capture that enthusiasm and openness, and really make an impact in the market. So
you're saying before reality kicks in.
Well, the UAE welcomes people from all over the world, right? So pretty soon it's going to be, Israel will be the relations that they have with many other countries around the world. But it's the birth of something new. So I think it's a great opportunity in that respect.
And beyond the timing, are there certain recommendations?
Yeah. So I think the second one is, firstly acknowledging that the people that you'll be dealing with when you come over there, they're 90% expats. So you're as likely to be dealing with myself, an Indian or an Italian, in your business interactions, and a relatively small proportion of Emiratis, predominantly concentrated in government and in some leadership positions. So I think that's the consciousness of that diversity, and then specifically in dealing with the Emirati community, I think that there's clearly times of the year which are a little bit different from others. So during the Ramadan period, the country goes into a much quieter mode. Activities move towards the evening. There's more meetings that are beginning at 10, 11 o'clock at night. Once people have eaten in the evening, that's more accentuated in Abu Dhabi and Sharjah and the Northern Emirates than in Dubai. I think that's an important consideration. I think patience is another important characteristic. Things can move either very slowly or very quickly, and you will engage in a discussion, and there will be an enormous amount of enthusiasm. Lots of things will happen very quickly, and then something will fall, and things will suddenly go quiet for a while, and then a month later you get a phone call, and suddenly it's high speed again. So I think that fluctuating kind of time dimension is another one to be conscious of.
Got you. So let's say an Israeli company or startup attending this webinar is getting excited about the potential that they hear from you. What should the company do in order to just initiate a process of penetrating the market? What would you say would be the immediate next step?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of alternatives. I think if you're a tech company, a fintech, agri-tech, that doesn't require to be physically in multiple locations in the UAE, you can set up a free zone company in one of 20 or so specific free zones in the UAE, and you can do that very rapidly. It takes a couple of days to set up, a couple of $1,000, and you can have employees in the market going and visiting various different businesses in the UAE, marketing your products and services. So I think that's a very kind of a first step. And you can hire a Brit, or you can hire, bring over some of your team from Israel, or someone who's been in the market to help work on you understanding the market and how to move ahead. And you have 100% ownership of that company. No need for a partnership. 100% control and very easy to get going. If you're a business that is thinking about setting up a manufacturing entity or a retail outlet, then you would need an onshore license, so to set out outside of these 20 or so free zone clusters. And for that, you would need a local Emirati partner who would take a 51% share. Or there's a number of these agencies that act as partner agencies, and you have, you know, background legal agreements to ensure that the ownership is with you. That's a bit more expensive to set up and takes a bit longer to do. But those are the two paths forward. I think the second consideration is to say, you know, where are you going to set up? Because, you know, with these types of free zones, you have Internet City, you have Media City, you have Silicon Oasis. They're all targeted for different clusters of industries. But importantly, there's a distinction between Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And I think if, you know, to characterize this a little bit, as you think about where you're going to set up, Dubai is really the trading commercial hub, very vibrant, very cosmopolitan. And really private sector orientated, very dynamic and ambitious. Abu Dhabi, much more traditional, much more family orientated, and generally a bit slower, but the center of all the money, all the oil wealth, and the government and public sector operations. So I think that's the second choice as to, you know, where do you decide to set up the location. And then thirdly, you'll go to market. You know, how are you actually going to make traction with the relevant target customers or businesses in the UAE? And I think the nice thing about the market is, given it's so cosmopolitan and, you know, is relatively developed, there's lots of people who've been here for many years. So you can either hire someone directly who's been in the market for many years, you know, an expat who's worked in some of, you know, similar types of companies. You can hire a professional services firm like BCG, or I think there's maybe some others. Or the government is also very open to encouraging Israeli companies to come across. So depending on your sector, there's very often a government entity that's a window into that sector. So in fintech, for example, DIFC, the fintech hub of Hive, you can reach out to them. You say, look, we're interested in coming along. You know, can you help us engage in the market? And it's a very welcoming environment in that respect.
So Godfrey, to this point, and I'm actually referring to some questions that have been asked, but it also goes to the conversation that you and I had last week. There's a lot of noise. You know, some Israeli companies are thinking of going at it directly. Some are approaching or being approached by, I don't know how to even call them, but dozens or if not hundreds of finders that have some sort of a royal title associated with them and say, you know, we're going to open doors for you. How would you even consider or assess whether someone's legit, how credible they are, whether Israeli companies should work with an intermediary or go at it alone? And related to that, are there certain sources of information, depending on the sector, of course, but that you would say these are go-to resources for foreign companies looking into the UAE market?
Yeah, I think there's the UAE market is very open, and you have many people from many nationalities trying to make a quick buck and capitalize on economic opportunities. I would really encourage businesses to almost do it themselves. There's lots of people here who've been working for a long time in established companies, and just as you would recruit in Israel someone who's coming from a company with a very good reputation and background, I think there's good opportunities to recruit many people now, particularly in the downturn. There's lots of labor looking for opportunities in growing companies, and tap directly into different businesses using that kind of talent. I think these finders and I would treat them with a high degree of skepticism. it's a relatively easy market to kind of navigate. And so I think, doing it yourselves, doing it through a government entity or a professional services firm is certainly kind of an attractive way forward. And I think you'll find it much easier than many other markets because there's this real openness.
So a question we haven't prepped for, but I'm just throwing it out there. If you're an Israeli businesswoman or businessman landing in Dubai, and you're saying, I just want to figure out what's happening here, what would be the first place you'd go to?
So I think it depends a little bit on the industry that you're working with, and I would firstly reach out to a government entity that is in that particular industry sector. So you can have an introduction with them to begin with, whether that's the Chamber of Commerce, whether it's the FinTech Hive, or the free zones themselves really are there to attract new customers. So you can go to the free zone of Internet City and say, look, we're a company, this is what we do, we're interested in setting up a company in your area, tell me about the market, tell me who I need to get connected to. And the free zones are there to attract companies. They will go and they will explain things to you and really guide you in the right direction in that regard.
Got it. So any kind of panel or moderation would not be, I think, whole without using the expression an elephant in the room, even if it's completely irrelevant. So there's an elephant in the room, Saudi, which is obviously not part of the deal. But some companies in Israel, for them, it's considered the holy grail, given the size of the market, the size of the country. So if we were to be optimistic and assume that the accords that we're seeing will translate into additional warming up with Saudi, are there any implications for Israeli companies thinking about the UAE today? Any steps that they should take today to make sure that they're prepped to if and when this market and other markets in the region open up?
Now, I think there's good lessons learned from many other companies around the world who have been thinking about the GCC. And there's a
just to be clear, Godfrey, for those who are unfamiliar, the GCC would be the broader region, including Saudi.
Exactly, the Gulf Cooperation Council. So these are the 6 countries of the predominantly oil-rich Arab states. So, and as you say, the big prize is Saudi Arabia. So what many other international companies have done is use Dubai as a cultural and logistical stepping stone to the broader region and particularly Saudi Arabia. And in that respect, I think if your longer term play is Saudi, I think setting up an operation in the UAE, and again, these free zones, it's not very expensive to do, and you can have a presence. But in Dubai, particularly pre-corona, every Saudi holiday, the UAE was just full of Saudis, and it's a great place to make connections with the Saudi community in the UAE before things begin to happen in Saudi Arabia. And I think many of the Saudi big family businesses will be thinking about, how can they leverage these opportunities, and are probably, many of them beginning already to explore conversations around deals that could be made.
Got it. So Godfrey, we still have room for just a couple of questions, just so everybody is aware of the timeline, and if anyone wants to submit additional question. Most Israeli companies thinking about these agreements, I think, in terms of how they can monetize on the market there. Are there implications that we should consider in terms of talent, both in terms of what Israeli startups and companies can find in the UAE, as well as even relocation opportunities for Israeli talent?
Yeah, absolutely. The big gap in the UAE is on the talent side. So we're setting up a bank at the moment in Abu Dhabi, and it's hard to find people. We're going to the guys in London, particularly at the COVID time. You've got to leave London, your family and your friends, and ship your family over to the UAE. So attracting talent is is a big challenge. And I think that there will be a great openness for Israeli, particularly the tech talent. I know specific companies that are looking explicitly at Israeli tech talent to come over to the UAE. So I think there's.
Can you offer an example? Like, what do you mean? UAE-based companies thinking about Israeli talent?
So I know financial services institutions now who are proactively going to the Israeli market, looking to recruit tech talent in Israel.
And there's actual conversation, Godfrey, just so I'm clear, of let's think about whether we can bring an R&D person from Israel.
Absolutely. I was in a conversation last week with a senior Israeli banker about coming over, working for an Abu Dhabi entity, 2 weeks in Abu Dhabi, 2 weeks back in Israel, long-term contract. I know a government entity that is looking at, how they can incentivize recruitment of Israelis into the market.
All right, so I think that's a headline right there. If there's indeed conversation taking place within banks on how to bring, say, an Israeli CTO, maybe this is even more mature than we had in mind. And I think in our prior conversation when we prepped for this, Godfrey, I think for me what was surprising was, I think you said something to the effect, talent is talent. If you could bring tech talent, they'll take tech talent. If you could bring something else, they'll take something else. For the UAE, it's just a big global pot of talent that if it could be used, they'd be happy to collaborate now that the accords are out of the gate. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's tremendous openness. The UAE is very commercially orientated. They want to develop the economy, and they want to diversify away from oil. The faster they can do that, the faster they can build up sustainable businesses, the better it is for the future of the country. And it's an ambitious nation, right? They have a plan for 2071. For the next 50 years, which has been formulated. They want to go to Mars. There's the Museum of the Future, Dubai Future Foundation. Is very forward-looking. They see to compete in the world, we need to be at the cutting edge of innovation, and we need the right talent to enable us to get there.
Right. So, Godfrey, maybe just last wrap-up question. This is fantastic. Before I pass this back to Zeev and we break out to the room, if you could pick any technology, any sector, any type of company, what would be the offer that you think has the most chances of succeeding in the UAE? So like, wow, if you as a company, an Israeli company, you've got that's a big deal.
Yeah. So I think there was a change in the government structure a couple of months ago. They created a new ministry, the Ministry of Industries and Advanced Technologies. And I think that there's particular importance around that. So the whole set of technologies around Industry 4.0 and automation and AI I think is a very interesting area that I think the companies in that space will do well. As you see on one of our slides, there's a number of others that are important, but I think the Industry 4.0 is going to be a big push. There's a very influential gentleman at the top of the ministry who's got a mandate to really push the country forward in that area. So that's certainly interesting.
This is fantastic, Godfrey. I'm not saying goodbye to you yet because we're going to pass on to the fintech, but this has really been very interesting for me personally to hear you speak. Zeev, any parting words for the plenary session?
Yes, thank you very much. It was really, really, really interesting. So thank you very much. So we're going to say goodbye from everybody now because after we're going to split into the rooms, we're not going to reconvene. So again, thank you very much for everybody from TPY, Guy, for this lovely moderation, and to the BCG team. And I just again want to reiterate the fact that we will send you our contact details of the Chamber of Commerce for the Israeli companies here. If you guys also would want to interact with the BCG or with TPI, we can share with you their information as well. And also to I remind you that we have signed both agreement with the Jebel Ali Free Trade Zone and the Dubai Airport Free Trade Zones, which are the two largest free trade zones in the UAE, and we have a special benefit package for Israeli companies to go through them as well. So thank you very much, guys, and without further ado, Shai, are you going to...
Yes, I'm just going to say a quick note to all our participants. If anyone by any chance got in the wrong room, just send me a message on the chat box so I can switch you out. And that's it. I'm going to open the rooms and we'll see you soon.
That's it. Good luck. Stay tuned. Don't leave. Press join.
אין לי מושג מה את רואה על המסך.
Great. So we're now in, just everybody realizes where they are. We're in the Fintech Telco. I'm delighted to continue with Godfrey for the next 15 minutes. That's all that we have. Godfrey, if anyone hasn't listened in the beginning of the initial conversation, he leads BCG's financial institution business in the UAE, based out of Dubai, more than 20 years of consulting experience, even though it doesn't show. Godfrey, you look great. So let's start a conversation about fintech in the UAE. And the UAE is known to be kind of the financial center, I guess, of the Middle East. What does this actually mean?
So I think it's the financial center in two ways. So Dubai is very much the commercial hub. So people wanting to do business in the UAE predominantly through Dubai. So it has a very diverse setup of kind of commercial banking operations. Abu Dhabi has one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world with ADIA and a lot of asset management business. So those are the kind of the two pillars, if you like. And it has a very vibrant financial services sector. So you have almost 50 or so banks. It's quite closely regulated. You have about 30 odd finance companies. And a growing number of fintechs. There's, I think this relates back to the point we discussed in the plenary. There's not as much talent over here. You don't have a lot of unemployed coders who are sitting around thinking about fintech innovation. And so I think the relatively small number of fintechs is a reflection of that. But this is
and sorry, Godfrey, just specifically on this point, not the talent, but what we're seeing here, which seems like at least the genesis of an ecosystem, is that ecosystem domestically, exclusively domestic, or is it geared to support the larger region, and the hub is just in the UAE?
Yeah, so many of them start off in the UAE. They say, let's win in the UAE and let's move more broadly across the region. I think given the regulatory fragmentation across the region, cracking the UAE regulator is one thing. Then you go to Saudi, you have to crack SAMA, the Saudi regulator, which is completely different and on a whole different kind of kettle of fish. So there is that, it's win in the local market and then expand regionally. Because of the travel between the regional countries, that is facilitated, but it's you still have the regulatory barriers to work through.
Right. So when you look a little bit, Godfrey, maybe just we'll take it one step down into the ecosystem of financial institutions and fintech. Is it different for each of the Emirates?
So there is certainly a distinct push and even competition between the Emirates for fintechs. So, as an Israeli fintech looking to come into the UAE, you will have a choice between going to probably the DIFC free zone for the Dubai International Financial Center free zone and the Abu Dhabi Global Markets free zone. They have separate regulators and they will compete for you. Their objectives are how many companies can we get to set up in our free zone. And it's a big deal if you as an Israeli fintech set up in the Abu Dhabi free zone versus the Dubai free zone. So they will actively court you, and you should absolutely speak to both of them and see, all right, well, what are you going to offer me and what are you going to offer me? That needs to be in combination with the markets that you're trying to target and what you want to do. But I think that's that's a pretty important consideration.
Got it. And so, if we take it from the macro to the micro for a second, are there any case studies that you can think of particularly successful or unsuccessful foreign companies that managed or didn't manage to make it into the fintech world in Dubai, and why? What's the root cause of success or failure that you've identified over the course of the last few years?
Yeah, so I think there's a company, Consensus, the blockchain company, Joe Lubin from the US. So they really did a good job in the UAE. So they came in and were working with they got a small piece of work with Smart Dubai, which is the smart city agency that kind of drives a lot of Dubai. So they entered a tender. They won a small piece of work, really put a great effort into it, and caught the imagination of the Dubai leadership. They very quickly went over, set up an office, and started using that one connection to talk to a whole array of people. Firstly in the UAE, but then also in Saudi. So the guys, an ex-BCG guy, went to lead their strategy stuff. He was organizing meetings with the minister of a major minister in Saudi Arabia, with a bunch of other ministers in the evening, with the Consensus guys sharing their view on blockchain opportunities and how Saudi can kind of capitalize on that. So I think that's a kind of a good example of where you get a little window in the door, right. You make a great impact and leverage that out. I think on the negative side, yep. I'll give you a downside as well. So Fedor, the kind of the fintech banking player in Europe, had a joint venture operation with one of the banks in Abu Dhabi, and that didn't really go very well. It took and it wasn't set up well from the start. So from the point of signing the agreement to the point of launching was a very long time. There wasn't the right investment from their side or from the client counterpart to make it work. And there wasn't.
What does it mean, Godfrey? Like that they didn't have the right investment? What went wrong there, to the extent that you can elaborate?
So I think there wasn't the right number of people on the ground with the partner solving problems and making the relationship work. It was kind of like, sign an agreement, here's some tech, you can make it happen, follow up what we said in the agreement. There is a lot of, there's a need to kind of work closely together with, your partner, handhold them through the challenges, make sure that everything is fully understood on the other side. So really invest from a time and capability point of view in making it a success, which is really what the Consensus guys did, and put a lot of guys on the ground, made a great impact, then leveraged those kind of personal relationships, less so with the people.
Got it. This is super helpful. Maybe a little bit of a more tactical question, but again, I think many of us are really intrigued. Sharia law, anything Israeli companies should be aware of? Does it fundamentally change how fintech companies should be thinking about this? Given, if you could speak a little bit about what it means in terms of Islamic law, Sharia law, which prevails, to my understanding, in the UAE.
Indeed. So in the onshore environment where most people live and work, this is the environment outside of the free zones. The regulator is the central bank of the UAE, and the law is indeed based on Sharia law. Within the free zones, and you have, Dubai Financial Service Authority and the financial regulator in Abu Dhabi, those are based on, English common law and a separate law. So if you set up in there and you do your contracts under that, no Sharia law, involved, and no problem. In the onshore environment, which you would need if you're going to do banking businesses in UAE dirham, and if you're going to connect into the country's payment systems, then you would be subject to UAE law, which is Sharia based. Is it particularly cumbersome? It's less the fact that it's Sharia that makes it problematic, and more that it's a little bit of a cumbersome legal process, which takes a little bit longer than it should to reach resolution.
Right. So it's not that tough to make Sharia law kosher. I just had to. Oh yeah, I think that's
a
good word for it. So while I'm looking at this very BCG slide in front of us, what's the process of obtaining banking or payments or lending licenses? If now we're talking about the regulation in the UAE, which benefits can companies gain from obtaining any of those? How would you recommend thinking about this process?
Yeah, so I think firstly, to have an onshore banking license, it's not going to happen. There's 50 banks. They're not going to introduce any more banking licenses. If you want to set up a new bank, you have to get a license from a merged entity, and it's pretty expensive and a complex process. For fintech plays, I think there's three windows. There's the fintech location, which is the fintech center at the central bank, which has just been opened, led by a very forward-looking gentleman from the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. And there is the two regulators in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And so those are the places where you would go for your licensing. And the free zone regulators, it's a relatively fast process. If you're with the central bank, it takes a little bit longer, but it's very clear and articulated as to what needs to happen.
And to that end, are there any crucial regulatory frameworks that foreign financial institutions must be aware of? And let's take, a startup that does all the way from P2P lending to payments to everything else that we're seeing in the fintech sector, risk management. You have to go through a certain regulatory framework as you think about working in this market?
Yeah, so the central bank is pretty transparent in terms of the regulations that you're required to abide by. I think from a regulatory point of view, there is particular scrutiny around compliance. So because UAE is this hub for many people from many parts of the world, some of the big fines globally for non-compliance have related to SME businesses in the UAE. So if you're going to be involved in the payments industry, you better make sure that your compliance team is really up to speed. And the creativity of fraudsters from around the world always impresses me, because however well prepared you are, there's lots of creativity. So I think paying particular attention and really highlighting AML and compliance as one of your strengths, particularly if you're in that payment space, is going to be really important.
Interesting. So maybe last question, my end, and then Godfrey, if there's anything that you feel like we've neglected, please surface it up before we move to Thibaut. Is the UAE as a consumer market, you think, sufficiently large? Or again, should this be used as a gateway to the broader region? Is there a potential for real expansion if you're looking at, which consumer-related technologies have succeeded in or have potential to succeed in the UAE fintech space?
It is it's the size of Israel. It's a 9 million person population, and in that respect, it's an attractive market. Is it Saudi is 25 odd million, and you have India next door, which is 1 billion. So relatively sized, it's a wealthy market. There are many attractive elements around it, but it depends very much on the kind of the proposition which you're kind of taking to market. I think if you can crack this market, then the rest of the Middle East, as it begins to open up to Israeli firms, it's a great stepping stone to go down that path.
Got it. And again, I'm seeing the beautiful slides, so I cannot but react to them. Out of the 5 pillars that you've outlined here, is there anyone that strikes you, we're at the end of 2020, going into 2021, which is saying this is probably the biggest deal in the UAE in terms of interest?
I think off this slide, I think point of sale credit is a very interesting space to get into. I think banking as a service is not yet up and running here. I think there's interesting things in that space. I think over time you'll see the Saudis probably moving a bit faster on some aspects of crypto than the UAE. And maybe finally one that's in addition, which came out in a speech from the new governor of the central bank, is around open banking. It's going to take a little bit longer, but I think that's an area where there's certainly
and that would refer to what in the context of the UAE when you say open banking? Like, it would be particularly which area of open banking?
So we're going down the paths of encouraging the banks to set up open APIs to allow easier integration with fintechs from around the world. So similar to
Godfrey, an absolute delight. It's a shame I have a life where you're not part of, but I really, really appreciate the partnership on this, and really, I think, very practical insights. There are a bunch of questions that have been asked and we didn't get to address, obviously. If anyone has additional questions around fintech, feel free to send it to our friends at the Israeli Chambers of Commerce. And again, to the extent that we're going to have our friends from BCG's here, we're going to try and address them. Thank you very much, Godfrey, for your time.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you, Guy. And pleasure to speak to all of you today.
Great. And here we are with another person on a jacket, Thibaut Verlet. Did I say it right?
Perfect, yes.
Okay, so very nice to have you here. For those who are asking, why is there a breakout room with Fintech and Telco? What's the relationship? There's none, but we did have to consolidate versus break into 10 different rooms. So, and Godfrey and Thibaut are both extremely savvy in what's happening in the UAE in these different areas. So, very glad to have you with us, Thibaut. Thibaut is the managing director and partner in the Dubai office of BCG, and is a core member of the technology, media, and telecommunication practice. I suspect many people on the call would relate to these areas. He's been advising telecom operators, ICT regulators, and policy makers in the UAE and broader in the Middle East for more than 10 years. And you lead, Thibaut, the BCG effort in the region when it comes to ICT regulation and sector development. I hope I said that right. Which areas in the broad world of telcos and communication, again, we're going to open it up beyond how to serve telcos, do you think are the most compelling to foreign entrants into the UAE?
So first, thank you very much, Guy, for having me, and it's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. So when we speak about the ICT market in the UAE, you speak about a market of roughly $16 billion, right? Now, half of this is connectivity. Like most countries, it's not growing very much, not so much opportunity. So I believe the opportunity are mainly in the broader ICT space. But I just want to spend a couple of minutes to speak about the connectivity business because it's quite specific in the UAE. It's actually extremely protected. Why? Because you have two operators, Du and Etisalat, that are basically owned by the sovereign wealth fund of the UAE. And they're also the main contributor to the government budget through the royalties, right? So as a result of that, I would say the connectivity business in the UAE is a very protected business. As I said, only two operators that are domestic players. Voice over IP OTT applications are not allowed. So FaceTime is actually not working in the UAE, right? It's blocked. There's a few other OTT that are actually blocked. You cannot get private network license if you want to operate your own IoT network. You cannot get a private network license, so on and so forth, right? So you have to keep in mind that the connectivity business itself, everything that will depend on the connectivity will have to be done through Du and Etisalat that are basically controlling the market, right? So that's just the first point on the connectivity part.
Right.
Now, if you think about it, the other side of the connectivity part is that you have very strong infrastructure. I think we see this in this slide, right? So the UAE is actually number 3 in terms of fiber rollout. You're talking about like a country that compares with Hong Kong in terms of fiber penetration. So you have very strong digital infrastructure, and that's a little bit the compromise with the telecom operators, right? It's protected, but they're investing in very strong digital infrastructure. So that's actually very positive. 4G, 5G is also in current rollout, right? So very strong digital infrastructure. Now let's speak about the opportunity, because that was a key question.
Right.
As I say, I think you have to look into the broader ICT space, right? If we go, I think we have one slide on this. We're talking about a market of around $1 billion, right? In infrastructure, in software, in IT services. We see quite strong growth, mainly on cloud, IoT, managed services, and software and cybersecurity. They're growing quite strongly. They piggyback on the fact that you have very strong digital infrastructure, right? So much easier to move to the cloud when you have fiber rollout everywhere. Same thing apply for the other technology, right? So I would say the opportunities are definitely beyond the connectivity business. They are definitely around those, but just always keep in mind that all these business are basically dependent on the connectivity, and the connectivity is with the 2 established players. So I don't know. I hope that answered that question.
Absolutely. And following up on this, when selling to this sector in the UAE, let's again open it up broadly, telco communication, what do vendors need to know?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there's definitely an aspect of price sensitivity, right? So I think now the end users have become very aware and very technical and very mature in their ability to assess technical vendors, right? So the tendering process are actually quite long, quite tedious now, and you have very strongly established committee looking into this, right?
And Thibaut, to be clear for the audience here, what I'm hearing from you is that the tendering process is the default, right? You've got it. That's how we would.
I would say in 90% of the case, because and that will go to my point on who's buying technology at the moment, right? You talk about typically either government or very large companies, right? And because of their rules, they tend to go into a tendering process, right? So that's I think something to be aware of, is that most, especially if you're looking into government contract, because they are a major buyer of technology at the moment in the UAE. If you're looking into government contract, they will go through tendering process, right? And these are typically long process, and both from a technical aspect and from a commercial aspect, you should expect to be challenged, right? So I think that's the first one to have in mind. Now, another element I think on what to know about the market, right? So I think it's also important to understand the balance between supply and demand, right? So if you think about the demand, as I said, it's quite concentrated, right? So at the end of the day, government organization, if you take the large companies like Emirates, like the large commercial banks, like the large oil company, right? You talk about probably 20, 30 entities that are driving most of the market, right? So I would say the largest opportunity will probably be with these big entities, right? Now, on the supply side, you have a mix, right? And I think it's also important to understand the dynamic on the supply. So who will be potentially competitors, right?
Right.
I would say there's probably 4 buckets. So if you take Israeli company as one bucket, who are the 3 big buckets? The first one that you will see, large MNCs, right? So because UAE is a hub for the whole GCC region, for the whole Middle East region, right? All the large tech MNCs will be present in the UAE. The Microsoft, SAP, IBM, they are all there, right? So by default, when they see opportunities in the UAE, they will go after it, right? So you have first large MNCs. The second.
By the way, I'm cutting here, Thibaut. Would this be the direction that, if you're a CEO of a startup, is that the door that you would be banging on, saying, maybe we can do something together here, or is that misguided?
Partnership. I think you're completely right. I think partnership. Now, is that partnership with large MNCs? I'm not so sure. Where I see potential opportunities for partnership is on the 2 other buckets. there's a bucket of the telecom operators, right? Because Du and Etisalat, they definitely want to expand beyond the connectivity business into advanced ICT solutions, right? They typically don't have in-house these capabilities, so they will look for partnership to be able to go after these opportunities, right? So I think definitely approaching Du and Etisalat, the telecom operators, to partner on the advanced ICT solution is a great starting point, I would say. If you think about migration to the cloud, cybersecurity, so on and so forth, definitely an opportunity. The third or the last bucket, I would say, is domestic IT/tech conglomerate of groups, right? So what we've seen recently happening in the market, which is quite interesting, is that in the past, the UAE was more the end user of technology. Now they want to change that paradigm. They want to move up the value chain, right? And to do so, they have created a few companies. We see them mainly in Abu Dhabi. So the companies like, for example, Digital 14 or G41, right?
And it's in Abu Dhabi, Thibaut, because of the government affiliation?
It's in Abu Dhabi for several reasons, because of the government, but also because they are being backed up by the sovereign wealth fund of Abu Dhabi, right? So
got it.
The entity that has the financing through the sovereign wealth fund of Abu Dhabi, right? So you see these new established entities, right? Their approach to is basically to try to build the capabilities in the UAE, right? So they want to localize the tech value chain. And I think here there's also an opportunity, right? Because they've been launched very recently. There's also a gap in terms of talent, in terms of technology, and then they will be definitely looking out for partnerships, right? If you think about companies like Digital 14, again, if they want to expand their offering on cybersecurity, this is definitely something that they will have to go through partnership with international.
And just to be clear, about Digital 14, for those of us who are not familiar, it's just a newcomer that had been licensed recently?
Yeah, I think they have. I mean, I don't quote me on the exact year they were launched, but you talk about companies that are, maximum 3, 4, 5 years, right, of history. So you think about tech companies, yes, they're quite recent, right? And their service offering is quite broad, right? So they go into the whole, I would say, digital offering, and as a result, again, because they want to be a one-stop shop for most of this digital solution. They are looking for partnership. And I think the opportunity here also is that they can get you access to some of the large government projects, right? So I think it's obviously much easier if you want to go after the large opportunity from the government tenders to partner with either, as I said, the telecom operators or these new established companies to try to get a chance.
Terrific. Thibaut, 2 questions, and we're going to do like them blitz style, just because regrettably we're running out of time. Imagine that I'm telling you that there's one startup. I asked Godfrey earlier a similar question that's flying into the UAE. What would be the startup selling in this space, broad TMT, that would get, the clients that you're familiar with to work most excited about? Yeah.
I think, in the region, I would say the brand that Israel has in the tech space, I would say it's mainly around cybersecurity, right? So I think if people get excited, that will be definitely around cybersecurity. As you can imagine, big opportunity. There's also some broader implication on national sovereignty. So I think definitely cybersecurity is an area of expertise that I would say companies here in the UAE will be excited for. I would say everything related to industrial IoT is also actually quite something where Israeli company could be well positioned, right? Everything related to Industry 4.0 and the application of IoT there. And then smart city, definitely this is also very high on the agenda of the government, both at the federal level, but at the Emirates level, right? They're all trying to have, to be the leading edge of smart city. So
and lastly, we're not going to end up with a failure, but if there's one either cautionary tale or a fantastic success story that you're saying to the people on the call, check this out, because that will tell you, at least for one example of a foreign company or a startup that managed to do it particularly well or not that well, what would that be if anything comes to mind?
So I hope the example is relevant, but it's on the connectivity side. But I think a company like Huawei did it very well, right? So they understood a few things. They understood first the part on working here in the region, and one of the key aspects was around leadership, right? So the UAE always want to have to be able to brand themselves as having the leadership in specific technology, right? So if you think about what Huawei did on the 5G, so first they put Dubai and the UAE on the map of 5G commercial launch, right? So they partner with the telecom operators to really push at very fast pace the rollout of 5G equipment. So that was great. I think what they did very well is on the branding. So Huawei partnered with the UAE government to have this massive display on Burj Khalifa when they did the launch of 5G in the UAE. And I think that's also something that resonates very well, right, with everybody. It's not only, there's a technology advancement, but they're also claiming the leadership in the region. Right? So Huawei did very well. I think that was quite a powerful example.
So I leave the people on the audience to figure out how they get to the size of Huawei and then figure out how they manage to penetrate to the UAE. I'm sure some people are like, first let us get to this size. But Thibaut, really, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, including yours. This has really been a delight, genuinely, to partner with you and the rest of your team on this. Again, mentioning Augustine on this call for the stellar work that he's done preparing for this. For everyone who had attended, on behalf of TPY, the Israeli Chambers of Commerce, and the Boston Consulting Group, very much grateful that you took the time to listen in. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody.
Goodbye.